Very good morning to you once again if you're just joining us. Well, the deep divisions in the ANC have been laid bare at its National Executive Committee meeting. In his address, Party President Cyril Ramaphosa outlined some of the issues challenging the ANC. The Secretary General, Ace Magashule, remains suspended and he's been ordered to apologise for issuing a letter to suspend the President. Now, to unpack the situation, I'm joined by political analysts Mcebisi, Ndletyane and Sandile, Swana. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to ask this first question to the both of you. Let me start with you, Prof. Ndletyane. And are we waking up to a new reality in the ANC, or is it simply too early to tell?
We are waking up to a new reality. Perhaps I would challenge your characterization of where things are. Divisions have been laid bare for a while now. That much we know. What is now happening is that they are narrowing. You still have divisions, but they are narrowing. By that, I mean you no longer have contestation over whether or not corrupt individuals must be suspended, whether there must be punitive actions against people who are charged. The majority of the NEC is now unanimous behind that ethical principle, behind the need to rid the party of this imagery and scourge of corruption. So as soon as you have that majority behind the president on his reform agenda, that then indicates narrowing of divisions. However, similar cases like Ace are likely to come up in future. It may well be that Ace will not comply with his conditions of suspension. He might do all sorts of things, and then they will be called upon, or they will have to consider whether to expel him. So it is then that we can then conclude that at least they are firmly on this path of renewal when they overcome similar future challenges.
Okay. Mr. Swana, do you hold the same view that what we're seeing are divisions narrowing, or might you hold a completely different view altogether?
I think that when you say divisions are narrowing, I think I agree with the view that there is no disagreement about the fact that corrective measures must be taken against the corrupt. What the bone of contention is, even amongst the so-called supporters of the president or supporters of the anti-corruption drive, is this problem of systemic corruption, the corruption that is in every bone and in the bone marrow, in the DNA, and everywhere in the ANC, its government and its structures. Because what that means is that if you prepare a list that is derived from the findings of the Auditor General, the SIU, Treasury, and other institutions of people who are implicated in losing billions, some of the people who are charged by the NPA actually have handled small money. Some of the billions that have been lost are in findings by the SIU, findings by the Auditor General, and so on. So when you're dealing with systemic corruption, you've got to deal with the monies that were lost, the people involved, the causes, the root causes, the leadership causes of those losses and damages to the system. So meaning that 80% of the NEC could be affected by it. And that is where the test will be.
Yeah. You know, Mr. Swana, you touch on a very important issue, and I love how you characterize it, that the issue perhaps that has gripped the ANC for the longest time is this corruption, and as you describe it, that is actually now sits in the bone marrow of the ANC. That cannot be any more explicit, Mr. Ndletyane, than what we are seeing this morning. Sindiswa Komba, Zugiswa Ncitha, appearing in court in East London over the alleged stealing of funeral monies. Is the ANC any closer to ridding itself of this cancer?
It's working towards that. I like what Sandile said. working towards that, there is a high possibility that even if they want to ignore those cases, they will be exposed. The good thing about this moment is that the SIU and the Hawks and the NPA, they all seem to be working optimally. They might not have all the resources, but they are doing something. They have some resources. So we know that there's a high likelihood of these cases of corruption that Sandile is talking about being brought onto the fore. And so far, I want to warn us against this idea of, analyzing by analogy, because something happened in the past, so it is most likely happening now. For now, there's no indication that these public institutions, these law enforcement agencies, are not doing their job. Indications are they are doing their job. And so they will bring these cases onto the fore, and they will most likely go ahead and prosecute. So that alone is, if one care to see and highlight what is there and visible, that alone is a clear indication that there is we are marching somewhat onto a different direction.
Yeah.
And so the ANC will inevitably also have to act against people who are charged in those cases. That is a different direction. That is progress.
Yeah. Sandile Swana, let's come back to you and contrast for me President Ramaphosa's statements of unity, and I dare say after every ANC-NEC meeting. Contrast his statements that seemed to emphasize unity above all else versus what he said on Monday, which was yesterday. He says that Magashule has to apologize. He talks about an orchestrated and well-resourced campaign to sow disunity in the ANC. Is that a change of language? And therefore, with that change of language, them also organizing this retreat to talk about the state of this organization?
I think the ANC will have, when we talk about progress, we need to have degrees of progress. People who know first aid and medicine will tell you that the first thing to do with the patient is to stop the bleeding or stabilize the patient. Doesn't mean the patient is out of danger. You've done the first part, but you've gone now to get into the nitty-gritty of the thing. The calling of and I'm talking about this issue of unity and what causes disunity and what will cause unity and where we are with this issue of unity. I think we cannot run away that whilst there's been a trend of corruption, there has been another two trends that need attention. Those two trends has been the increase in general incompetence, the appointment of people who are either clearly negative to the progress of the programs of the state. Recently, Ostamabuyane announced that the greatest number of ANC-run municipalities in the Eastern Cape are dysfunctional. And the Eastern Cape is a very well-resourced province in terms of natural talent that has been developed by the educational institutions and so on. But it can't run its own municipalities because of two elements. The one is the increased number of incompetent people who've been put there. Two is the corruption. Three, the other issue that is causing disunity, which has got to be solved. I'm now also touching on this 3-day, I think they've called it a 3-day consultative conference, whatever they've called it, that they want to get into. The question is whether they are actually for a certain period of time, maybe we can start in the Polokwane conference, whether in this period from Polokwane until now, or even from 1996, depending who you're talking to, have they actually departed from their principal mandate, the reason for existence, and then existed for themselves to the detriment of the general population? So those are the issues that are coming up that need to be solved. To say that Cyril Ramaphosa Ace Magashule and others are going to be expelled, others are going to be forgiven, others are going to... That is not neither here nor there. The issue of whether the ANC is still faithful to its vision, the issue of corruption, and the issue of mind-boggling incompetence and laziness in the public sector, those to me are the issues that the ANC has got to actually address.
Yeah. Prof.
And
Ndletyane,
unite around.
Yeah. Prof. Ndletyane, let's talk about the supposed victory, if you want to characterize it as that. And I suspect the Ramaphosa faction might have a problem with that because they're going to say, no, but you see, this is a triumphalist way of characterizing the situation. But the reality is that I, as an ordinary person, may view what is happening in the ANC as a Ramaphosa victory versus the Magashule faction. How is this, or will it have any material impact about how things are done in government?
It is a victory, but I think it could have been a much greater victory. I think they are still tentative, very tentative in their measures to address this problem, given its magnitude. I don't think their conclusion is appropriate to the magnitude of the problem. When Ace Magashule wrote a letter suspending the president, he created a huge infraction. He doesn't have powers to do that. He was clearly defiant. He showed complete contempt. And that, for me, becomes a perfect candidate for disciplinary hearing. So instead of doing that, they decided that he must apologize. And even in that instance, they didn't specify when he should apologize. So they are still mollycoddling him. And one has got to understand the character that they're dealing with. This is someone who has become accustomed to acting with impunity. And he sees himself as a tough guy, a defiant figure, standing up against forces of white monopoly capital. So he might not apologize anytime soon. So my fear that they might be thinking that they are applying restorative justice, perhaps, that you don't want to hit hard because you might alienate a whole lot of other people within the ANC. But a renewal of the ANC cannot come without turbulence. The ANC, the reason why it is where we are now, we have people doing things that some called un-ANC, is because these are people who are not committed to the vision of the ANC. And so you need to rid yourself of these wayward elements. And so this whole idea that you will have a seamless renewal process, it's nonsense, complete nonsense. You need to confront, having confronted the problem, then you need to deal with it. And dealing with it includes expulsions. They have still been tentative. Yes, this is a victory, but I think they could have gotten a lot more out of this to accelerate the march towards renewal.
Interesting indeed. So this is a perfect candidate for disciplinary hearing. That's your reference to Ace Magashule. When we return, we'll wrap up the conversation about what this might cause in the body politic of the African National Congress. I'm talking about the structures of the ANC lower down, the branch of the ANC being described as the basic unit. What is going to happen there? And perhaps that might make for a much more interesting conversation. We'll continue in just a moment. Very good morning to you once again. If you're just joining us, we are in conversation with two political analysts, and we're talking about the outcomes of the special meeting of the ANC-NEC. Mr. Swana, I would like to put it to you that if we judge by Ace Magashule's actions thus far, defiance, he's unlikely to respond positively to the instruction that he apologize publicly for what he did, sending a letter of suspension to the president. What will that do in the structures of the ANC lower down as we head to the midterm conference? That's the National General Council, which some branches are saying must be held within 90 days. But also, remember, we're going to the conference, an elective conference of the ANC, in just, this is next year.
Yes. This presents a difficult situation. Magashule is well placed to be expelled from the African National Congress in terms of the developments that have happened up to this point. However, the suspension of Cyril Ramaphosa by Magashule, irregular as it was, the message that it sent out politically was that we have an ANC where the illegitimate crooks, if you like, are chasing out of the ANC and sending to prison other illegitimate crooks. So Ace Magashule and company are raising the issue that in both factions are equally corrupt, if you like, or substantially corrupt, both of them. Mm-hmm. And Cyril Ramaphosa himself is also part of that corruption. Therefore, why must this affect only one faction and not the others? Is it actually just simply a purge so that when the corruption and state capture and other things continue, then the others are out of the picture? So those are the issues that will be present when they go into the elective conference next year. That elective conference is unlikely to have no undertones and explosions. Mm-hmm. And part of the explosions will also come from something that in most countries tends to be a problem. We have been since 2009 on a continuous economic decline, and since 2018 a rapid economic decline. Mm. And when people are under pressure economically, there must eventually be a scapegoat. Cyril Ramaphosa may pass that back and say why he didn't make any progress this year. It may be Magashule was stopping him, or whatever the case is, fire Magashule. But there are a lot of other people who know that there are certain blunders that have been made consistently since the Polokwane conference, and they've continued even now. So I think those issues, I don't think the tensions and the explosions are going to stop simply by firing Ace Magashule. And Ace Magashule is well placed to be fired.
Yeah. Prof. Ndletyane, let's wrap it up. How messy is the road to the NGC and the elective conference going to be? And factor in governance. Will it be disrupted as we may have seen in the past?
Quite a number of ANC members, probably about 90% of them, are not motivated by conviction in their actions. It's more about material considerations. And so what you have normally is that you have party barons, regional leaders, provincial leaders, who mobilize the base members. And most of these members are rented members. ANC membership is employment for them. They are members of certain individuals, leaders in the party. And so they get swayed which way to vote. These are materialist-oriented members of the ANC. And so the leaders who normally sway and mobilize this support will also look at which direction is the wind blowing. Who is likely to re-emerge in the next conference as the leader of the ANC? Because they are similarly concerned about patronage. So they will not support a losing horse. And if you look at Ace Magashule's base, his own province might have a different PEC. And now with Kgalema Motlanthe in charge of bringing those feuding factions together, you most likely might have Xoli Mngambi emerging as the new leader there. And so that on its own, his own province electing a PEC made up of his previous opponents is an indication of declining support. So with that declining support, and if one looks at other provinces, they've been echoing what the president has been saying. So the wind is blowing in the direction of Cyril Ramaphosa. The runners who mobilize support want to be on the good side of the president. And so they will not go out to mobilize support against the president, because once the president re-emerges, they are going to be sidelined. This is about patronage. It's not about conviction, especially because ACE's politics are not based on any ideology. They are fake. They are insincere, right? So I'm not worried about members mobilizing against Cyril, because the wind is blowing into a different direction, and they always follow the money. The members, most of them, follow the money, and the money is with the Cyril fraction, in that they will re-emerge, and when they re-emerge, they are in charge of placement. They are in charge of deployment. So the PEC people will want to go back to government, REC will want to go back into municipalities, and now you have local government elections coming up. And the intention is that though the selection process is going to be carefully done with Kgalema Motlanthe in charge. So national office will most likely be determined to have good standing people of moral grounding. And so the local leaders are aware that if you don't behave properly, you don't follow the tune of headquarters, you'll be out. So they will follow the tune, mainly because they are career politicians and they follow the money. Well,
that's a good point to end it. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your insights. Professor Mcebisi Ndletyane is with the University of Johannesburg, and Sandile Swana, a usual contributor here on this channel. And my thanks to you both for your contributions this morning.